Wednesday or Scrum Sredom, uh, let's say a local Balkan conference that Boris and I started now that we had a lockdown here, as an idea to share some of the stories, experience, and both enrich the local community as well as bring the foreign speakers to it and share some of their experiences. Tonight we are having a dear friend of mine and agile coach with a long experience, Michael Kusters. Hope I did pronounce that right, Michael. Author of numerous works, among others, Scream Guide. I would say a great tongue-in-cheek idea on what can go wrong with Scrum and what are some anti-patterns that we can see typically happening. So with that said, Michael, the stage is yours. Thanks a lot for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bogdan. So today is about Scream. I'll introduce myself a bit later. Scream, yeah, is intended as really a parody of the Scrum Guide. If you haven't had a chance to look at the Scrum Guide, feel free to do so. The Scrum Guide can be considered very sarcastic, but today I would like to not be so sarcastic, but rather explore into the reasons why I actually took my time to put up this piece of agile anti-patterns. Let's talk about, I'm Michael, I'm a consultant coach trainer. I've been working in the agile space for about a decade. Before that, I was Six Sigma consulting, and I also have a developer's background. I get around a little bit, and I like to explore new ideas, and exploring ideas is what we will be doing together tonight. So what do I do when I'm not working with clients on helping them either adopt new technologies or adopt new ways of working? What I do is I like to write stuff. Here, for example, I wrote this cartoon book, Everything Wrong with Agile. It's compilation of anti-patterns. Maybe you've seen it. In cartoons form, the Scream Guide is anti-patterns in Scrum Guide form, but then I have some more serious works. Extreme Agility, it's available on LeanPub. It's basically other ways to think about working than traditional organizations might do. More thought provocation than actually do this kind of thing. Spirit of Scrum is my personal reminiscence of the Scrum teams I used to work with in the past, which is quite a number. Some of them work better, some don't work. So if you're interested in my personal experiences of what I did experience with Scrum over the years, that might be interesting for you. Then when the Corona situation came up, I was in a fortunate situation that I was already working remotely before, so I just brain dumped my experiences. So if you are in a situation where you need to host agile events, that might be a book for you to go to. And then I have my own blog. Sometimes I have longer articles, sometimes I have no articles for a longer amount of time, but it's just what I do other than working. Plus I have a family with 2 kids, but that's a different topic. So let's get to the core of the matter. Scream. Scream, not Scrum. I like to make the differentiation. What is Scream, not Scrum? In my opinion, I call everything that is a deliberate presentation of anti-patterns or misrepresentation of Scrum, it's Scream. I love Scrum done well, but unfortunately, we see so much Scrum in the industry that is not done well. And because Scrum is very, very common, but what we see is typically not Scrum. What we see is Scream. So my claim is Scream is the world's most widely used agile framework. When people say Scrum, they mean Scream. So what we have is not really Scrum. Scrum isn't all that common. People use Scrum terminology, but what they're doing is Scream. So can I back up my claim that Scream is the world's most widely used agile framework? Of course I can do it. You just need to look at the Scrum guide and what companies do. The first thing when people see Scrum is they say, well, we're a professional company. That doesn't work here. It's idealism. You have to make some changes because otherwise we can't really use it here. So they take the Scrum guide. Yeah. Okay, that paragraph doesn't really work here because our developers aren't put up for that. That paragraph doesn't really work here. That one we have to change it. That one we have to change it. No, no, no. Okay, so we have to make some adjustments. And then we do Scrum, but we do our own version of Scrum. And that's how we do it around here. And at that time, it's already no longer Scrum, but companies claim it is Scrum, but it isn't. The Scrum guide is a fixed set of rules, and we change the rules, it's no longer Scrum. I mean, you're playing chess with two queens. You're totally okay to do it, but it's not chess anymore. So you're free to change Scrum in any way that you want to, even though it's no longer Scrum. The unfortunate thing is that companies like to change it in a way where they think what they're doing is a good idea, but it isn't. Because they don't know agile ways of working, they're introducing anti-patterns and they don't even know it. So what is Scream? To quote the Scream guide itself, the Scream framework is an imitation of Scrum to look exactly like Scrum to people who don't know what's really going on. Is cementing status quo rather than creating a flexible company culture that fosters change. We are preserving existing mindsets rather than getting into new ways of working, and we create an illusion of improvement rather than real improvement. And when you take a look at your own personal experience working with companies, what happens when a change initiative comes up? Everybody says, it will be great. Everything will be good. Management will spend a lot of time to communicate why this change is important and what are the benefits that you're going to see. And just look at your own experience 1 year down the line. What's really different? The names of the roles have changed, but the people are still the same and the way of working is also still the same. So what have we done? And when Scrum is brought into companies, this is what we see. And the reason why I wrote the Scrum guide is because companies do this. They take a look at Scrum and they say, no, we can't do this. It would require too much change. Even though the entire point of Scrum is to create an organization that is able to change easily. And if we don't want that, then why should we change in the first place? So that one is just the background of why I wrote it. And what I'm doing with the Scream guide, yes, it's humorous, it's sarcastic, in some cases it's really sardonic, but it's the anti-patterns that we see, that I observe in companies. I'm trying to use humor to start a discussion of what's going on. So when you are looking at the Scream guide, either when you're reflecting upon it at home, or you can read it together with your team, you can look at, okay, if it's in the Scream guide, it's probably wrong. And if we're doing that, why does the Scream Guide say that's how you do Scream? And if it's in the Scream Guide and not in the Scrum Guide, then why are we doing something that is Scream and not Scrum? If you can use that as a reflection opportunity to discover why is this happening, then I have achieved the goal that I wanted to achieve with the Scream Guide. And tonight, I will be asking a number of questions, and I would like to talk with you. This is not me presenting a talk for 2 hours. This is us having a conversation for 2 hours and me using this one to facilitate a discussion. So when I go into those matters, I would really like for you to unmute yourself and get into a discussion with me. And maybe even with each other. I would be more facilitating to make sure that we can take a look at all of the aspects of Scream within the time frame that we have. So let's get started. Scrum. What are Scrum? Scrum starts with a bit of theory, the pillars of Scrum, the pillars of Scream. We also have them. Obfuscation, asymmetric information, moving targets. What's the problem that we see in companies? Why is it so difficult to have transparency? Why do we even need to talk about it? What do you think?
Well, data flow and data protection typically are the two common arguments.
Mark?
Yeah, that's a very good question, I think. I mean, if you talk about transparency, I like to think about it like that we sort of understand why we're doing anything. I mean, there's reasoning behind it. It's sort of like common understanding, and we can have that on various levels. So from my own personal experience, I have promoted transparency. And then what I see as an anti-pattern is, for instance, sometimes in upper management is sort of like, no, we can't be fully transparent because something is secret. And then I asked, okay, to who? Well, competitors cannot know stuff or whatever, stuff like that. Sure, but how can it be secret to anyone in the organization? If you're not telling us what it is we need to do or why we're doing it, how can we do it? I mean, so why is it? I mean, it's sort of like they're saying stuff is secret. You cannot tell it openly in the organization. That's fairly odd to me. So that sort of suggests that they don't trust,
Definitely
us.
is. How does it affect you and your work when you don't have the information you need?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I mean, you can do this any which way, but if you want to have transparency across an organization, a big one, no matter whether it's big or not, then of course, at least from, let's say, from a top management perspective, from a strategic perspective, we should all know why we're doing stuff and what it is that we need to achieve. I mean, strategic objectives, let's just call it that. So, I mean, and even in a big organization, I mean, that's obscure to me sometimes. I mean, what's the most important stuff? That's unclear. We have 20 things which are most important, or 100.
We'll get into that part
Yeah.
later with many things being important.
Mm-hmm.
When we have those kind of problems, that it's already difficult for us to do the best possible thing.
So I would at least say what I've seen is when I talk about transparency, I mean, I think, I mean, nothing should really be secret to others in the organization, but sometimes it seems to be like that, and I cannot guess what goes on in the heads of others. I shouldn't, but for whatever reasons, some don't want to share information, it seems, no, it's hidden, or I need to ask somebody if I'm allowed to share with you this strategy document. I've had somebody say that to me, which is slightly odd. Okay, I'm not allowed to see the strategy, So, yeah.
Anybody else?
Hi,
Hello?
Emiliana. Hi, Michael. And hi, everybody. My impression is that there might be some correlation between lack of transparency and a culture of blame. I mean, when there's a culture of blame in place, people are usually afraid of tell the truth, share information, because they are afraid they could be blamed if something is wrong with this information. So maybe this can apply to some companies out there.
Yes. I think that fear and blame are also great drivers of Scrum implementations.
Yeah, sure.
I would like to share one thing. Do you see me, guys? What I observe very often is that some people, only very few people have certain rights to access infrastructure, to access certain machines. And that takes so much, it puts so much waiting time, inefficiency. And this is also one thing which is secretive. It has nothing to do now with strategic matters or anything, but this is also part of our tools. And I think it's a great pity that we have this in so many places. And we hurry with the work, and then you have to wait 2 days because the person who can do it is simply overloaded.
Oh, yes. It creates wonderful bottleneck situations that make simple things really complicated. Thank you.
Yeah, the holy machines, only one of them is allowed to make a deployment to a service or something like that.
Yes. When we get into the point of asymmetric information, it's also a great way to make people scream is when different people have different information, and sometimes it's even being done on purpose. Has anybody experienced that one?
I'm
Yes.
not sure if I ever experienced it on purpose, but that's the common goal, especially or a common thing noticing in big organizations, that you have the side agendas and everybody wants to also, while doing a project, push for their small goal in between. So you end up in a crossfire. So I think that's also a valid source of such asymmetric information.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this many times. I mean, in especially in now, I say strategic initiatives again, somebody wants to, change the business model of a company. And then it starts with a small group of people, and then it needs to be secret for whatever reason, what is going on. And then, gradually it opens up, and more people know it inside the company. But that's like very deliberate and only on a need to know basis, which is, I mean, that slows things down tremendously. That will mean that to change anything that takes a year instead of, it could go faster, right? Or years, basically. So yeah, I've seen that.
I may contribute. I have seen it in a very toxic company I was in. It was an insurance in Munich, and they had the culture of having no vision, of almost having no communication with each other. And the result was everyone has had his own version of reality. So it was always based on an assumption. So that's what you, Michael, said. Have you experienced that different people have different informations? Yes, but these were just presumably informations. These were, yeah.
What do you think is the root cause of why this is happening?
It had in the past that they had several very bad decisions of the management. They have tried to get rid of the people. People got very insecure, and also a few people who were in the leading position are not quite people's people, and that creates even more fear and Missgunst in German. How would you say it?
Yes.
Well, I think one
Jealousy,
thing.
yes.
If I can add one thing here, I think, I mean, it's very, you know, it's very easy to think about other people as having like, you know, hidden agendas or evil intentions or stuff like that. I mean, and I don't know, I'm not inside the head of other people. So what I would say is when taking like a systemic view, when you have a very big company, I mean, if you're like 50,000 people in that company, then it begins to become pretty difficult for everybody to know the same thing, and probably you don't want that anyway. But it becomes increasingly difficult for, you know, top management to let everybody know what they should know, if you understand my meaning, as opposed to a company of 10 people. So just for the sheer size of a company, that makes things pretty difficult in terms of communication management, if you will.
If you take that one from a level of abstraction, I would say that there is an underlying theme, and that is that people talk more about each other than with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we also have one comment.
One of the great things in a Scrum organization is that it's very easy to talk to the people that you need to talk with. And when it's easier to make an assumption than to reach the person that you need to talk with, that's when we start to create this problem. Okay, let me move on to moving targets. I think this one is probably one of the things that developers hate most. What's been your experience with how companies work with moving targets?
Mid-sprint reprioritization, or sudden, or the other thing, everything priority one until declared differently.
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced, but I mean, even if we want to welcome changing requirements, it seems like it might seem very, very random, you know. Just all the time, everything is changing all the time. So there's and if you're trying to practice Scrum, I mean, you tend to want to have at least some stability in terms of the you know, the sprint. You know, it's not that you don't welcome changing requirements, but if everything is changing every 5 minutes, then it's pretty difficult to do anything. So I mean, I've seen this pattern, but it's all, I think it's also very important to, I mean, it's easy to say, again, it's them who's causing that. I mean, equally is the product owner, for instance, or the Scrum Master who don't understand their roles, maybe, are not practicing it. You know, it's not just about others saying it. You know, as a product owner, you also need to, you know, manage expectations and you know, the art of maximizing the work not done. So, I mean, you need to understand your role too. So it's not just them, you know, coming with stuff. It's not just random, you know.
But Mark, let me just pick this up. When you describe having such a setup where the changes come very often and in short period, I would say this is something that we start mixing moving target with chaos. I also think this is an important job of us, of Scrum Masters, to point this out when we also run into in situations when people say, "Oh, we are agile, so let's do this meeting ad hoc, unprepared." So there is really we should be the ones who should really take care for what is really being agile, what is responding to a change, like through a review. When we recognize new things, when we have new discovery. And the other thing would be like an anti-pattern. So.
Yeah, my point was really that I mean, I see a lot of Scream out there. I would tend to agree with Michael on that one. So and the Scream is not just about like management or somebody outside a Scrum team doing that. Is equally those in the Scream teams who are practicing it. So that was just my point, you know. Yeah.
Totally true.
I mean, there are
well, if I may say one word, that's also what when we run into such situations, that we have this kind of blame game, us and them, that I always try to say we are partners, we are consultants. So if we have a situation where we need a solution, then let us work together. Let us create something meaningful.
Yes, fully agree.
Mm.
I mean, we can always ask ourselves, are we part of the problem?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
a good one, yes.
I would like to say that one thing I realized in management consulting is that a lot of middle management is very reactive. The problem pops up and they are expected. That's what they get paid for, to solve this problem as soon as possible or find somebody who can solve it. And when you've had a strong and even a very good middle manager who has learned over the years that when some problem comes up, they have to find somebody who will immediately pick this one up as a priority one. And the next thing that comes up will be the new priority one, even before the old thing is finished. That is how organizations typically tick before an agile transformation, that a manager is expected to change the priorities fast and rigorously as soon as something comes up. And the mindset is that the newest thing has the highest priority, because often tracking and transparency is missing of what else is in progress. And the consequence is we start a lot of work and we never finish anything. I was working with an organization. When I came in there, I said, I looked into your Jira. You've got started work. When I look at the strengths of your teams, it would take you about 2 years to finish what you started. And the answer from the manager was basically yes, but we can't not start it when my boss comes and says, I need you to take care of this. So sometimes this doesn't even have to do with this team. The team is even just part of a system that has been organized this way. And that is where I come back to Andrea. This is the Scrum Master's responsibility to figure out why is this happening. And you may need to go far beyond the team itself, because the team can't solve it, because it's not a team problem. Okay, I think I need to move on. We spent a lot of time on the pillars of Scrum. Now this is a fun exercise. The Scrum values. Does anybody recognize those Scrum values from somewhere? I did copycat them. Now let's play a game. What is the worst definition you can come up with that still would fit the terms? Let's start with courage. What's the worst way to define courage?
Courage to take sick leave even when project is at stake.
Okay, that's a good one.
Deploy on Friday.
What?
Deploy on Friday.
Yeah.
We've got also in comments, courage to blame others.
Yeah, that's a bad one. Another?
Courage to release with many bugs. Courage to release even if we have bugs.
How I defined it in the Scrum guide is the courage to take more work than you can handle. Okay, so how about commitment?
Maybe commitment to fail each sprint.
Yes.
Or the commitment to be understood like the team owes this and it has to be delivered until then and then, even if you work night and day and weekends.
Yes, or as Nitin said, commitment to all the tasks. So commitment to full sprint backlog getting done.
Commitment to be punished.
What?
Commitment to be punished.
Yes. Bogdan, just want to pick up on that one. That's a very, very common anti-pattern that we see in seemingly healthy Scrum organizations, that the teams commit to completing all the tasks rather than on reaching a common goal or on delivering value. I've worked with teams where literally the developer said, this task doesn't even make any sense anymore. We don't need it. And I asked, so why are you doing it? And he said that because we committed.
We also get some in comments like commitment to be late on every single Scrum meeting and commitment when someone is watching.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm as committed as you are watching me. Okay, openness. What's the worst way to abuse openness?
We've got openness to hurt others, openness to blame others. There is also commitment to be commitments flexible on the late side. I would personally say something like openness to the latest Medium article, openness to top management, openness to accepting the new role even if we are not sure that we meet the criteria. Just, fumbling along and hoping it will work. Openness to sacrifice quality.
Those are all good ways to use openness as a negative. What I have found is that openness can very well be weaponized. I just want to push an idea on you. Like you say, for example, openness to take the new role or openness to try out the newest suggestion from top management. Openness, I say, I want you to do this, and you say, no, that's a bad idea. And I can just say, why are you not open?
It's easy to weaponize because to disagreement. And also, Rodrigo had openness, everything goes in. Michelle, openness to sprint scope change, and openness to not like anyone.
Great. Okay. Focus. How can we abuse focus?
Focus on everything.
Focus on just one thing. Focus on just one thing, or focus on your task only.
Focus on the next thing that pops up.
Focus on the next thing that pops up.
Yes.
Focus on your manager's priority. Or even better, focus on your job security.
Even on a Scrum team, on a properly working Scrum team, what I sometimes observe is that focus becomes shutter vision. It's similar to what you said, focus on your task only, but it can also be the goal has been defined like this. So we focus only on meeting this goal, but the goal should have been this. It was the wrong goal, but we're pursuing the wrong goal because we're not even thinking about what we should be doing. Respect. How can respect be negative? Respect is a good thing.
Sorry, just the last one. Focus on focus. Yes, it's possible. Dan.
Yes. So how about respect? Is there any way to abuse respect?
Respect, please. Can you see that we are very busy? By Rodrigo. Or if I may add, in words of Eric D. Cartman, respect my authority.
Yes.
Respect only the hippo, highest paid person's opinion. Respect to the top developers only, or only stars.
I see that is a very, very common anti-pattern in organizations, that respect is attached to titles or positions on the org chart. And self-organization is impossible as long as we have a higher esteem for people because they are higher up in the hierarchy. And even with the current organization I work with, we are working very hard with management to get developers to have a voice even when senior managers are in the room, because it's not easy. We are not raised like this.
Sorry to pop in, Michael, but do you think that's the way of working of people, because we are social animals?
It is. It's just the way that we need to see that being respectful of another person is not the same as being respectful of the title on their business card. I mean, if my CEO has a stupid idea, I need to tell my CEO the idea is stupid. You may be a smart person, but this idea isn't. Okay.
You got the final one. Respect managers, not Scrum meetings.
So let me get into the Scrum roles. There's not so much difference. What you might realize here is the nice icon I chose for the Scrum Master. So let's talk about the first role, the product owner. The common anti-pattern that I see with the product owner is that many companies, they just take a senior analyst and they are the product owner, and they write the specification document, give it to teams, and that's Scrum now for you. So when we look at those questions, what's the difference between a product owner and an analyst? What do you think? What's your experience? Why might it be a bad thing if an analyst becomes a product owner?
Oh, there is a huge difference. Everything is different. Like vision prioritization, responsibility for ROI, for return on investment.
Well, but I don't know, why is it necessarily a bad thing? That's the other question.
It's not necessarily a bad thing, but why can it be a bad thing? I mean, what is necessarily a bad thing if your strategy is to say, okay, we have the analysts, so we change the title on the business card from analyst to product owner, and we're done with the change. Okay, so Maybe I say a few words from my experience, what I've been experiencing. I'm not focusing so much on the PO analyst because, of course, everybody can learn. The problem is when product owners are put into the position without being given the time or the coaching to learn what is expected from them. And they continue the behavior of analysts because analysts are useful member of the Scrum team. The problem is when the product owner gets too deep into the solution space, they restrain the teams, and all of a sudden it becomes more important that the teams finish the quota of the work allotted to them than to deliver the value in the most efficient way that is possible. And who is focusing on the value when the product owner is focusing on the content? That is one of the typical anti-patterns that I see with two technical product owners. And the real question sometimes we have is, where's the team heading? What are we going to do in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? Who has this vision? When the analyst just gets served a feature request from business and thinks about, okay, will this take 1 sprint, 2 sprint? How many stories is this? Who's taking care of this? Those kind of questions we need to answer. And the problem is that when we look at Scrum, as per the Scrum guide, there is only one person who defines what value for the team means and how the team should maximize the value of their work. And that person is the product owner. But in Scrum organizations, typically the product owner is just the person who gets fed requirements from people who have the real say about what the Scrum is doing, the Scrum team is doing. And in every single case, that eventually becomes a genuine Scrum situation. Because the teams, they are not self-organizing. They are not in control of their work, and they can't make the choices they need to make in order to do the most important things for the company, because somebody else has already decided before they ever find out what they're supposed to do. So the Scrum Master, good question. Why should we even spend money on a Scrum Master, on a Scrum Master? Why can't we just take a project manager and be done with it? How does a Scrum Master act? So I would like maybe you to come up with experiences of cases where you would say that is not what a Scrum Master should get paid for, but that what is I saw my Scrum Master doing.
Well, I think we all can think of a glorified secretary doing all the outlook and note things. Or I think Boris also has good ones of this topic.
Yes, policeman, secretary, definitely. What else? Jira and Confluence, admin. It's usual stuff. But they look Scrum Master in that kind of eyes.
Thank you. Any other experiences?
We got here one NDA.
Remind the people for the meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And come for people and say, I have a meeting right now. Can you please hurry up, because the other part of the team are waiting for you.
Explicitly defining definition of explicitly defining sprint goal. I heard that happened sometime.
And what I like in some companies, they have processes which are broken or not good, and they say, well, you as a Scrum Master, you fixed it. So.
Or here, as Elena said, closing all unfinished stories task just before the Scrum review meeting.
Yes. Yeah, making sure that the burn down chart looks nice. Yeah, one of the things that I have seen on a negative side, don't want to go too deep into this, the worst thing a Scrum Master can do is, how to say, to be the management spy in the team. Personally, for me, one of the most important things for a good Scrum Master is to create an environment of trust, because we have already discussed from the beginning, fear is a great driver for Scrum practice. And a lot of Scrum practices are strengthened by fear. So when the Scrum Master brings in trust, they can reduce the effectiveness of the Scrum and increase the effectiveness of self-organization. It doesn't even matter so much what their specialty is, in whether they are more of a technical person, whether they're more a psychological person, more a relationship builder, but they need to build trust. If they can build trust, then they can create the basis for the team to self-organize and to make the changes to the process and to the organizations that will benefit them. And so for my really the worst experience that I personally had, and even after years, I'm still a bit upset about this, that I had a Scrum Master. I was giving myself vulnerability, talking about my mistakes, and he reported them to management. And I had a manager chime in on that vulnerability and use them against me. And that was the last time I did trust any information to that Scrum Master. And all of the retrospectives were fake after that. So come to the development teams. Team or teams, if you have multiple teams, it's also possible. In a Scrum environment, what are developers? Typically, there is a kind of concept in traditional organizations. You have the managers, they're the important people. Then you have the analysts and architect, they are also quite important, and somebody's doing the menial work, and those people are developers. That's not Scrum, that's Scrum. So when we are talking about a development team, self-organizing, cross-functional, what are your Scrum stories from where that didn't work, where a development team was called self-organizing or cross-functional, but it wasn't true?
Okay, my personal one, working on a big company, making things going up and down. Teams self-organized as per matrix defined by management. So basically pre-made cross-functional teams as we see them.
What did that cause?
Well, full artificiality. There was no team. There was still just a work group with their parallel swim lanes, and sprint was basically a dash to complete your Jira ticket as soon as possible.
How does that affect the value created by the team?
Well, I would say something like decimation does to morale.
Well, any other stories? Maybe I can share a short story from myself. A typical thing that I see is that I have a so-called cross-functional development team that gets their requirements from a so-called cross-functional analyst team and delivers to a so-called cross-functional test team. So it really depends on how we define cross-functional. If we would say that our goal is really to have a single team that is able to pick up an idea and turn that one into releasable product without having any third-party dependencies, that's an entirely different definition from saying we have a cross-functional development team. We can do front-end development, we can do back-end development, we can do database development, and we can even do a server scripting. But we don't know how to test it. We don't know how to deploy this stuff. So it's a different definition. And in large organizations with specialists, then sometimes when I'm doing a reorganization, we get into the question of, yeah, but if we want to have all of the specialists, we need 40 people on a single team. How do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I would go with the one with the cross-functional team that is able to actually deliver some value. And I think that I mean, I've been in many different organizations, and one example I was in was basically they chose to organize themselves in Scrum teams. They called it speedboats, though. But anyway, and then they had fleets. But anyway, it was supposed to be Scrum, but it was Scream, and the very how the team was actually put together was slightly odd to me, because very soon it dawned on me that everybody in the Scrum team were business developers. That was it, you know. And they were basically being blamed for not being able to deliver value. I mean, which also included like IT. You needed IT skills and stuff like that, competences to do that. But of course, they couldn't do that. They had to hand it over, you know, to an IT team. So it's a slightly odd setup, I would say, as an example.
Yes.
So that was not cross-functional. Let's just say that.
And we also have here in the comments, so for Alex and Nitin, I'm a developer, so I do not restart the server, and dev team doing only coding, no testing, or paraphrased, cross-functional is a full stack developer without any testing. And Rodrigo here, an example of group thinking, rejecting differing viewpoints. Or providing complex solution to not so complex problems, or engineering boilerplating and such.
One, I think the funniest Scrum team I ever saw was in a safe context. There was one so-called Scrum team, and during the PI planning, they said, we can't get anything done in one program increment. And then I dug into what they were doing. The client had set up a Scrum team of people, all of whom were project managers, whose only responsibility was to create Gantt charts and hand over the work to other teams. So that was the funniest Scrum team I ever saw, because they already said that in 3 months we are unable to get any work done.
Also one from the console. It should be noticed that according to the Scrum guide, the term cross-functional refers to the team, not to the individuals, by Elena.
Yes, I think that's also a very common misunderstanding, and it creates a lot of totally unhealthy, unnecessary stress on team members. I'm not expected to know everything. I'm not expected to be perfect. I just need to synergize with my colleagues. Okay. And the funniest, there's also another funny thing that I had is one person said I do solo Scrum. So I'm product owner, I'm Scrum Master, and I'm team. It's very interesting interpretation of Scrum, I think. I mean, it's totally possible to apply Scrum patterns, but that is really stretching the meaning of what is Scrum.
I think those were precisely the people why there is a lower limit to Scrum put in, like 3 to 9.
Scrum has an additional role that you will not find in the Scrum Guide, and that is the Scrum Manager. Well, how does a manager fit into a context of a self-organized team? And it's a good question. The Scrum Guide doesn't talk about a manager in the context of Scrum. But there are still managers in organization. So what's their role?
Their role might be to do stuff which is not mentioned in Scrum, because Scrum is sort of delimited. I mean, it's not claiming to do everything. I mean, to take an example, you need to get paid. That's not defined in the Scrum Guide. Somebody needs to make sure you get your salary. Just one example, crude example maybe, but anyway. So I would say that the manager, I mean, here you have a role here. The manager is not doing the stuff which is in the Scrum Guide. The manager is doing stuff which is outside the Scrum Guide. Whatever that might be, budgeting, whatever things to make sure that these things are in place. So it's like assumed, I would say, it's assumed that you're like 100% allocated, or at least very high allocation when you're in a Scrum team. So somebody needs to take care of other stuff which is not defined in Scrum, whatever that might be.
Also in comments we've got, make sure that every task is delivered by the team by pressure or by making them shiver with fear. Support in first place, of course, and managers make the budget and PO should report to them on demand.
When you look at the typical things that in a non-agile organization a manager has to do, that in a Scrum context they shouldn't be doing, what would be some of those things?
Reporting.
Reporting.
They shouldn't give like estimates, tell them how long stuff will take, as an example.
It could be that's usually the team lead who would do that. But on a scale perspective, when I have bigger projects, then of course somebody would address management. Where do requirements normally go?
So are you asking like as an anti-pattern where requirements go?
Yeah, as an anti-pattern or just in a regular organization that is not organized according to Scrum?
Depends a little bit. If it's a big organization, maybe you have like a PMO, a project management office.
Yes.
And then you have project managers, I mean, typically, or programs, projects, whatnot. And then Scrum somehow needs to fit into that stuff. So now you have somebody giving requirements, not the product owner necessarily, but giving requirements to the team.
It can also be that a common thing that you see both in small and large organization is that when a business needs something urgently, They don't have time to set up a project, they just need it done. They start an escalation. So they just go to the team's line of management, typically 2 or 3 levels above the team, and say, do whatever it takes, I want this one on production on Monday. So they'll just drop it down, and it drops like a bomb into the team. So part of what a manager is typically intended to do in a traditional organization is to do whatever it takes to make it happen, so that there will not be any further escalation. Because otherwise, if I come from marketing and I don't get my stuff, and going 2 levels up doesn't work, I'll go 3 levels up. And then it'll be an even bigger bomb dropping on the team. So the manager would constantly be dropping bombs on the team, because they are expected to do this kind of thing. And the consequences of those drop bombs, that is, people get unhappy, work doesn't get finished, other stuff gets descoped, other problems occur. That's the manager's responsibility to deal with those stuff. And then we look again in a Scrum context. If we do proper Scrum, who's responsible for those kind of things? For getting work finished, for making sure value gets created, for making sure the team is happy? Who's responsible in Scrum context?
That's a good question, and that depends. You're probably fishing for the product owner. It's also up to the team themselves, but you're probably the product owner. You might also argue the Scrum Master. It depends a little bit what you mean when you ask that question.
Yeah, it's 3-in-1 questions.
Yeah. So I would mention the 3 Scrum roles actually.
Yeah, and that's absolutely the right answer. That the Scrum team is responsible for this, shared among product owner, Scrum Master, and the developers. So we're taking this away from the manager. And if this is everything that the manager had been doing so far, what do we leave the manager with?
Well, actually caring for the people and their deployment, the development. Sorry.
That's what we should be leaving them with. The problem is, if nobody has explained this to manager, they're looking to fill the void. And sometimes there are great Dilbert cartoons on where the pointy-haired boss, one of them, he sings like, I haven't done any managey things today. And then he just drops a bomb on Dilbert, and then Dilbert just says, that's enough management for you today. And so when managers don't know what to do, they might just be falling back into the habit of trying to create work for the team because they don't want to feel obsolete. And that is a very common Scrum pattern, that managers do things that they don't need to do and don't do the things that would help the team.
Actually, we have also something in comments among the lines. Manager is the guy who tells things when to do and do as they say it. CEO for value, making team happy, is the Scrum Master. CEO for everything. Managers are the one who keep booking unnecessary meetings. Managers are always busy on the other hand and don't have to attend the meetings they booked.
Yes. This is, again, we come back to the same point. Why do managers call for meetings with the teams?
Maybe they want to maximize resource utilization. I don't know. I wouldn't do that, but anyway.
But that's a great question of precisely describing the output versus outcome idea.
There is no one answer because different people have different reasons. But when we observe the patterns that managers start to take time from the sprint and clutter team calendars with recurrent appointment, like I want to have a status report, I want to have a juror fix, I want to have a sync or whatever, and I want to have some inside outs, whatever they call it. It can, one meeting, you can even argue it's okay. But you always need to get to the point of why is the need from management there to have this kind of meeting? Because if you don't explore it, you have a person whose needs may not be met, and even a meeting may just be trying to cover a symptom, not the root cause. And what happens in a proper Scrum team when all of a sudden managers feel dissatisfied?
You know, I would, Michael, maybe here take a point from our earlier discussion sometime that basically it's interesting how agilists as well take to misinterpret and don't understand the traditional management and their goals, and they're just try to block them off as also sometimes being a common anti-pattern towards agilization. Yes, it's different than traditional management, but those goals do have some meaning behind them. So we need to find that balance of how do we provide goal to the people seeking them and not disrupting them, because then we end up in a clash.
Yes. So the simple answer is when somebody's needs are not being met, we create conflict. And we need to be able and open to explore this conflict to find a solution. Yes, that is the point, that management isn't useless. Management serves a purpose for the organization. Why else would they do it? So we need to understand the reasons behind what the manager's intention is to find the best way for the organization. And that means we need to talk more with each other. And when a manager starts to call for meeting, then basically the idea behind is always that we're not talking enough. So how do we fix this? There can be many ways, but when the signals come, we should listen to them. Maybe I just move on to probably the most interesting part of the Scrum, and that is the Scrum events. We have the Scrum sprint, just like a sprint. It looks the same, except the difference between the Scrum sprint and the Scrum sprint is that nothing comes out. So we start by having pointless plannings, a daily Scrum, review performances where the team just shows how good they can present stuff, retrospective theater, and wasted refinements, plus topping everything off. The Scrum one-on-one, which is an addition to what we don't find in Scrum. I will go into explaining it in short. The Scrum one-on-one is not the meeting that you see in Scrum. It's not an event existing in Scrum. A Scrum one-on-one can be two things. It can be either the manager or the Scrum Master pulling individuals out of the team in order to give them different work or to track how the individual is performing. Those things are a traditional pattern we see in traditional organizations. I, as a manager, I have one-on-ones with my team members. I try to have them every week, but it doesn't always work. But in traditional management, in a resource utilization paradigm, my goal is to make sure is this person fully utilized. If they're not, I will give them extra work. If they're overburdened and are falling behind their work, I will find somebody else who can compensate some of that work so that we can keep our timelines. So it is a monitoring mechanism as well as a personal relationship mechanism. There's always a purpose behind it, and in a resource utilization paradigm, I'm responsible for making sure to use this time to assign work to people. So what happens when I do that in a Scrum context?
Well, then you don't have transparency. I mean, that probably doesn't go on the product backlog, I would assume. Those individual tasks.
It kills transparency, yes. Another great thing that it can do for us to create a Scrum.
I mean, clearly, the more tasks you have, the more context switching you have. I mean, you're doing, you're not working on a few things together as a team. You're working on individual tasks and doing context switching all the time. So there's a lot of waste in that. I mean, even if the tasks were actually like meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And people tend to feel puppeteered if you do that a lot, and that can be negative. You basically rip them of their autonomy, I would say.
Yeah, it's the end of self-organization. What else is a problem with that?
You basically stop having common goals. I mean, now you have individual goals instead, and individual performance reviews, etc.
Yeah, you create, I mean, you even bring barriers between the team members. There was a very funny story I had from one organization where the line manager, who was still exhibiting the patterns of managing work, was having one-on-ones with the team members, not with all team members, just with some of them, that we were in a daily Scrum, and one of the team members just said, oh, by the way, for the next 2 weeks, I'm on a different project. And that was like, okay, thank you for informing us. You know that we're not going to meet our sprint goal without you. And then he basically said, you don't have to tell me. You have to go to the manager. So this one not just kills transparency, it can kill the productivity of an entire team, even though the manager wasn't meaning bad. He did have a priority and he needed this work done. But this is absolutely no-go terrain in a proper Scrum context, because it's okay if the work is urgent. I can go to the product owner and say, whatever you're working on in this sprint, it's not as important as this thing. And the product owner can say, okay, you know what, guys? If you can't fit it in and deprioritize one thing, maybe we just have to terminate the sprint and do it instead, if it's that important. And then the team still can bond as a team. But the mechanisms, the power of the product owner over the backlog is broken when somebody else can push work into the team. And the team loses the power to focus on getting their work done when they are not even in control of their own time. Okay, let's start with the
Michael,
first big.
Like, may I just add one thing there? Like you said, urgent things can happen. That's of course true, and we are there to support the company. But as a Scrum Master, I would challenge this if this happens every week or every few days. Then it becomes like a systematic issue of the organization where we would really need to rethink what are the causes, what are the reasons.
Yes, the point you bring up is a very interesting matter, and that is the difference between common cause and special cause variation. We typically talk about common cause variation when unexpected events happen all the time. Then we have to say that there's a problem in the system, and we, instead of fixing the thing that we see, we need to fix the system. But if it's a one-off, the odd one-off, then we just can assume it's special cause variation. The unexpected can always happen, and we just have to deal with it. I would be with you that the first time it happens, I would, as a Scrum Master, would lean back and say, let's see how the team handles it. The second time it happens, I would say, stop. Let's talk about why is this happening again.
Yep, cool.
Okay, so pointless plannings. Come to the planning meeting. What's the intent of the planning? Why do we have this meeting, and what's the value we're trying to get out of it?
And that's where we plan the increment which we are going to deliver, the value, the testing, the things we want to test our hypothesis. And we agree what this is going to be.
And what makes the meeting valuable for you? I mean, we're investing like 2, maybe 4, maybe even 8 hours into this meeting. What makes you say that this was time well invested?
Well, the outcome at the end, it's the good measure.
Well, I would say not only that, but also the better common understanding of the goals ahead and some of the pitfalls, and seeing the path to like increased understanding.
If I'm a developer and I sit in a sprint planning, then for me, when I say, if I leave this meeting, I know why the work I'm going to do in the next 2 weeks is important and when I'm successful. Then I have done enough planning, and then I would just like to start working. And the faster I get to this point, the more happy I am with the planning. Boris, you look?
Yes.
You have an opinion?
Remember our conversation about Spring Goal that we shared before 2 days ago. That I share with you that I just come on the planning per day of my work, and the Scrum Master on that team just said to me that please stop writing down the Spring Goal. I, as a Scrum Master, have to define this. I just saying to myself, wow, come on, that belongs to the Scrum team, not you, but
yes.
Just remember that when you share your vision about and your situation about Spring Goals, you can tell everyone here.
Yeah, I think that a big problem that creates Scream environments is when the team is not in control of their planning. When they are basically force-fed what is going to happen. And there was a very interesting, very Screamish planning meeting that I had, where the product owner came with an Excel sheets of stories. It was not poorly written stories. They were con extra template and everything. He had already estimated them. So he said, I need those 8 stories done. Any questions? And everybody said, what's behind those stories? And he just said that just get them done. So there was no discussion. He knew what he wanted, but he wasn't engaging in a conversation with the team. It was just like, this is your work and you need to do it. And it wasn't much of a planning meeting at all. It was just, can you do this, yes or no? And if you can't, I need you to give me a proposal of how many of them you can do. So when you see that kind of a meeting, what would be your suggestion to improve that meeting?
There is still a comment from Michel that I think that's quite relevant for this topic. Software engineering skills are sadly no longer enough to get things done. A modern developer needs to invest some time in reading up on psychology, NIP, NLP, emotional intelligence, and dispute resolution.
Yes. Yeah, it's becoming more complex in those domains, I agree. But just take a look at the scenario I gave you. What would you do to improve it?
So the product owner just steps in and says, this is it, and then any questions?
Yep.
Okay, a couple of things I would suggest, somehow. I mean, first of all, if he just dumps like a spreadsheet of stuff on the team, generally that's probably not very motivating. So I mean, then he's lacking the whether we talk about motivation or purpose or why. We're missing like the sprint goal. So we want to know why we're doing stuff. All of us, I think. Whether or not we're talking about the meaning of life, or at least that we understand the meaning of the work that we're doing. Everybody sort of likes that to some extent. We're human. We would like to know why. So I think they should co-create, the sprint goal as one thing to handle that. Then if you talk about like mastery, if you talk about these terms like autonomy, mastery, purpose, I mean, that is also missing because it's just like a bunch of requirements. So if the product owner is more saying what it is that we need to do and why we need to do it, then it should be up to the team to be creative and figure out the best solutions. And you're not doing that if you've pre-written the user stories yourself and not engaged anyone in it. So, I mean, that's at least a couple of things here, talking to like whether we want to call it psychology or purpose or intrinsic motivation, that's missing, and the mastery part is also missing because you're basically just giving them a bunch of stuff they're not motivated to do, so you're not allowing them to come up with the best solutions to the problem as a team from what he just did there. So yeah, and the autonomy also, I mean, here you just basically told them it's these 8 things. There's no discussion. It might be that other user stories would actually be better if we know what the sprint goal is.
Yeah, I love the Dan Pink reference. This team will not have drive like that.
Can I? Sorry, can I add something? This is excellent, Mark. I like it very much. I believe actually the Scrum and Agile, it's a lot about empathy. And if product owner just puts a lot of tasks to the people, the team for sure needs to ask product owner, hey, who are we helping with this, and to whom do we bring the value? And it's all about it's about empathy and trying to understand, hey, who is our customer and why we are doing all this stuff, and is this really helping what we are doing, or are we maybe bringing more damage to the customer with just having a tons of feature in the product which is just confusing him? And this is and I believe really much it's a lot about this emotional intelligence. It's about empathy and trying to get in the shoes of the customer. Yes. And I think this would help to product owner, that actually the development team tries to challenge the product owner and tries to ask him, hey, why we are doing this, and for who, and what is the value? Thanks.
Absolutely.
But let me just take that train that Carlos said, but we can also approach it completely different. Even let's say you had the most unempathic person as a product owner. If you let him crash once the sprint with, hey, you've got these 8 things, go. You can always discuss with him things that he understands, like, okay, you did that, what value did that bring back to you? And it also might be something that, listen guys, if we don't do these 8 things, we can close our company because, you know, we need it, customers are screaming at us, whatever. So there might be something behind it. It's just about articulating it. Nobody just comes for the sake of argument that, listen, these 8 tasks are needed there. So for somebody totally oblivious to empathy, I would just then translate him into something meaningful for them, value, whatever.
I believe actually it's a lot about telling stories, and somehow try to ask product owner, please give us the story. What is the story behind these tasks, and why do you need it? And I'm a big fan of these user stories and this concept of, hey, I would like to hear the story behind it, not just a solution or task what are you presenting to me, but yes, what is the story? And I think having a story, it's more natural for human brain, for everybody actually to understand it, and it's about having maybe then, Bogdan, the way to how to convert this, it's actually from these 8 tasks, try to make 8 stories in the first step.
May I comment shortly to Carlo? Maybe you can you try to reframe it, to change the wording and say not to challenge the product owner, but how can we together, developers and product owner, find a solution and focus more on the problem. What are we trying to solve? And that would be a proper user story. That's where we start, and then we write the story together.
I like it. I agree with you fully, because sometimes product owner has already a solution, but maybe the development team has a better solution for the problem which he didn't explain. And
but you know, you will have that in most cases.
Yeah.
Even when you have the smartest product owner on the world, there are 5 to 10 other people around him. And in total, they are all smarter. They can do more things. They can cover more things. They have more questions. They have more experience in total. So why should it be one person when we all can be better and smarter?
And this is about culture. This is about having a culture in the company where people are brave enough to actually discuss about problems, not only about solutions. And this is why I believe that it's a common phrase: culture eats strategy for the breakfast. Because of that, because if you have a team which is brave enough to actually to face the problem and trying to really understand what is the problem, and then we come to, I would say, quality discussions.
I think that a part of the entire issue is also when the product owner didn't have time to properly learn their role, because coming to a meta anti-pattern, what I see, because I was working with Scrum training organizations in the past, is that you have a larger company, they have 10 people they send to Scrum Master training, and they say, now it's your responsibility to make the Scrum thing. And those people had 2 days of training, They get 1 week to prepare, and then the sprint is supposed to start, and somebody just gets assigned as product owner. They just heard from somebody who came back from a 2-day training over the way this is what the product owner does, and they have to make ends meet without ever having time to learn what a proper product owner is supposed to be doing and how to create value for the organization. They weren't taught these things, and they're just thrown into this. That's why it's important for the Scrum Master to actively spend time working with the product owner to figure out, okay, how can we make this role work?
I have seen this very often. Actually, in most of the cases where I have done agile coaching, I've done coaching for 9 teams, that actually product owners are very often not, they're focusing mostly on the on team. Actually, they're focusing how to just to get the food to the team, but actually their focus should be more about, hey, to the customer, and to do this customer development, and to understand how is the customer thinking, and to make up understandings of his issues, and doing this empathy. And I believe actually Scrum as a framework doesn't give much guidance in this. In Scrum, right? Actually, it's just one part of the product. What the Scrum Master should do, support to the product owner, but it's a very rough. I think it's not enough, actually, and this is a very common issue which I have faced in the past.
We also have a comment from Alexandra. The problem is when PO does not have awareness, dedication, and competency, the team cannot influence him by asking questions and trying to set common vision.
Absolutely. I think that for the product owner to ask the right questions is very important. One of the lessons that I had when I was working as a product owner, when I explain any backlog item and ask, do you have questions? The answer is usually no, because people are still digesting the information I gave to them. If I change my wording and instead ask, how do you understand this? Or what would you do to solve this problem? Then I immediately find out whether developers even understood what I'm talking about. I would like to move on a little bit to the Daily Scrum. There are some really common anti-patterns that you see in many organizations where developers get frustrated about the dailies. One of them is that what the single person starts to take control of the entire meeting. Another is that we constantly rip the time box and we're talking for half an hour or an hour about pretty pointless things. The status report is also a great anti-pattern for the Daily Scrum, where everybody is expected to give status, and it gets even better when a Scrum Master is taking notes and compiles a management report from that. What other anti-patterns do you observe with dailies?
I mean, I've observed many times the lack of those 3 pillars, transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Basically, that nobody is sharing, or I mean, it's not that you need to answer those 3 questions suggested in the Scrum guide, but if you don't answer those, at least that it's not covered what it is that you have been working on, etc. Is sort of, so no sharing really, and that is of course whether you use those 3 standard questions or not. Then there's no point of this meeting at all if everybody is just not sharing anything. I mean, and you're not asking for help if you need it, or you're not collaborating really. I mean, you shouldn't do stuff one-on-one too much probably anyway.
something I tend to see a lot also is we in front end are working on whatever, you know, that sub-team specialization qualifier, literally ripping the team apart into, you know, technology. But I think that is also stepping stone toward when team is forming if it was previously in silos. That being one, and the other one that I see, but that's more of a on a people side, is just waiting to bark out what they need to you know, disperse into the ether, and that's it. And there is also some coaching to team members to get them to believe that daily should also be returned. It is an investment of time, and they should care for the return of their investment.
Just building on what I said before, I mean, for like not very mature Scrum teams, I generally don't see the sprint backlog shown. Whether or not they're using it with, you know, post-its or, you know, some kind of tool like Jira or whatever, it's just not shown. I mean, it's just then, so nobody knows what you're talking about. So you have written down product backlog items, maybe in the user story format or whatever, but it's not shown. If they're not, even if co-located, sometimes it's not used, that particular artifact, which makes it a little bit more difficult to understand what it is we're talking about here.
Also, too, from comments, it takes forever, so 30 to 45 minutes, and no impediments for 99% of the answers.
Yes. I see that is a very interesting thing, and that is where combining Scrum with Kanban can become very valuable when you start to take a look at some core metrics like the cycle time of the work items. And when you see that items are taking unusually long, because sometimes what I see with not so mature teams is that a task that should basically be done in 3 days, after 5 days is still in progress, and the person or even people working on it, they just say no impediments, we're still working on it, because nobody has caught the fact that this one shouldn't have taken so long to raise the question, what is going on? Are you blocked by something? Do you need help? And that one, Mark, combines very well with what you said, when we don't have transparency of what is on the board, then it's very easy to miss those things.
And I believe what I saw very often, actually, the people are, as you said, screaming. They are just talking, but actually, and each person is working like individually. And
yes,
and this is very often the common anti-pattern. And what I believe is that daily Scrum, it's like a daily event which it's kind of a correction for the whole team how to work better. And before this correction actually needs to happen an action, that actually people need to first connect and be with each other and feel at least comfortable. And then and if they feel comfortable, then they are actually ready to help each other and actually think about common goals and having to see how they can solve daily or sprint goals.
That's actually a very interesting thing when you come into a new organization. I mean, suppose you're just looking for a new job and you have the opportunity to have 1 day with that company, and you just drop into a daily Scrum. From that daily Scrum, basically, you can know very quickly whether they have teams or just individuals doing stuff.
I agree.
I would also say another common anti-pattern I've seen many times is if you're attending, let's say, a daily Scrum number 3 in a sprint, no product backlog items are done. Not a single one. Probably because everybody is working on their individual stuff in a non-ordered fashion.
Yeah, actually, to share a positive experience here, we in one company we were using very consistently a walk-to-wall technique. So basically, we moved from right to left on the Scrum board, and we were looking at the first item on the top right. And basically, the question is, okay, what do we need to do to get this one done as fast as possible? And only when that question was answered, we did move to the next item. And after 15 minutes, we would terminate the event because everything else was irrelevant, because we want to get one thing done.
So was that, if I understood you correctly, was that a combination of you were using Scrum and a Kanban board, or what? Since you said left to right, or right to left.
Yeah, basically Scrum with a Kanban board. So you have items, and what is on the top right is the first thing that should be done because it's the first thing we started.
Yes.
And that changes the discussion. It changes the discussion massively. You start to focus on the work items instead of on the people. And if this item isn't getting done, and I didn't get to talk because I was not working on that item, if I want to talk, then I should think about what can I do to work on this item. Okay, so let's move into the review. Now we went a bit into detail. Now we need to hurry up because we just have 15 minutes to close the event, but I would like to take a look at the other events, the retrospective and the review. So what are great ways to mess up a sprint review?
Show a shit ton of PowerPoints.
Like I do, right?
No management whatsoever, or no stakeholders or no interested parties, and I see often that as sort of, team exercise of reiterating what we have done.
Very often I see unfinished work shown from sprint to sprint, in 3 sprints showing the same unfinished work, and this is very common.
So why does that happen?
That's dodging the blame game often in my eyes, because you need to show something-ish, no matter how vague it might be.
It all connects basically back to the same point that somewhere there's still a culture of fear and blame. Another thing that happens very often, a great way to mess up the review. I mean, we already had no management and no relevant stakeholders or / customers in there, and using PowerPoint instead of a real product. One of my personal pet peeves, you can correct me now if I am wrong, but one of the pet peeves I have is I say, don't show Jira in the review unless Jira is the product you're developing.
I just have to support you on that one. I wrote in comments that Jira is not being agile, and a single worst thing about Jira is assignee field.
I would actually say, I mean, I don't care about Jira, it's just a tool, but I think it can make sense to actually show the user story, I mean, the product backlog item, however you've written it, just, this is what we're going to demonstrate. I mean, that might make sense. Whether or not you're using Jira, whatever, it doesn't matter. But of course, it's not the Jira tool you're demonstrating. So just quickly show the product backlog item or whatever it is that you have that you're going to demonstrate. I think that makes sense.
I personally prefer the developer to just state in their own words, real briefly, what this is about. But at least I would like to trigger the discussion of what is the intent behind showing Jira. Typically, it is that developers are unable to express in their own words what they have done, and then they are not able to receive the feedback that they get from users because they may not even understand the context. It's not in a kind of blame statement, but if I really know what I'm doing it, why I'm doing it for the user, then I should be able to relate in a very few brief sentences what I've done. Because basically Jira is organizing the work, and regardless of whether we're doing it on a Scrum board with physical sticky notes or in an electronic tool, the idea is that how I organize my work, it doesn't matter to the customer. What matters to the customer is the outcome I have created.
I even find it interesting we're talking about Jira. I mean, no other tools are mentioned for whatever reason.
I think when Jira can be helpful on the review, when it's showing the big picture, where we are on the big picture with whole our release, and actually then going zoom out, zoom in. Hey, we are on the big picture here, and then we go zoom in, and we show this feature. I think there it can help, but Jira should be then configured on the right way to really to have this visibility, to have this transparency through Jira.
Well, Mark, now we are talking about Jira.
Yeah. I mean, it's my favorite hate topic. If we're using Jira, we're agile. That's it.
I think any tool can be agile or can be not agile, and it's all about depends about how we approach it and how we deal with it. If we deal with it on the not constructive way, it's like knife. Knife is just a tool. So what you will do with this, it's about you, and that's the same with Jira, I believe. I mean, Atlassian is doing a lot of work, a lot of effort to bring agility to the world. They are doing a lot of lessons, all this learning, and at the end, many customers are doing using their products on the wrong way. But let's not be us. Yeah.
No, I'm not blaming Atlassian or anybody. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's just a tool, and you can use Excel or you can use Word or whatever. That doesn't matter.
Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Excel has also done terrible things to developers. Carlo, do you have maybe Atlassian stocks?
And you want to know, I mean, there's always this thing about the person who set the default meeting length to half an hour in Outlook has probably wasted more hours of productive time than any other person on the planet. Okay, so moving on to retrospectives, I would just like to say that working with many organizations, a huge problem of retrospectives is that it seems that many teams, they have retrospectives every sprint. Each time they find a significant improvement item, but they're not getting better, even though they always improve. How is that possible?
Not having the proper focus.
What is a proper focus?
I mean, what you're talking about here, I mean, what I've seen happen very often, or, you know, just a repeating, and now you call it a theater, but repeating, occurring anti-pattern is that every single retrospective, the team is brainstorming about, you know, stuff, and they come up with a lot of stuff, and then they select 10 things to improve on. They don't improve on a single one of those, and then when they come to the next one, they don't consider whether or not this was actually an improvement or not. I mean, so they're not taking an empirical approach to improvement.
Or Mark, you can also have picking up those 10 items, improving on 5 of them, but the outcome doesn't change.
No, and you cannot see the causality. I mean, if you change like 10 things, I mean, what's cause and what is effect? I mean, it's impossible.
Yeah.
So, I mean.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This about cause and effect, I think, is interesting. A lot of teams that I saw, they're just talking about effects and not discussing, hey, why is this happening, and what is the causing these effects, and it's about, hey, just a manifest of what we are doing, and they are just blaming and actually arguing, hey, we have this kind of issues and have a bad, I would say, emotional energy, but they're not discussing, hey, what's the background reason, and what's the reason of happening to have this theater, as you call it. I like it. I like the word theater.
Yeah, so I've seen I've seen some team actually agree now, mentioning Jira and the assignee field, that because work was not done, then they should start using the assignee field in Jira. So now we know who's doing the work.
Okay,
great,
that solves the problem. Yes. Very common theme that I experience in many organizations in this context, either, yes, like Carlo, you said that retrospectives are just being used to blame. Either blaming each other, that's the worst part in a team, or blaming somebody outside the team who cannot defend themselves.
This is the most typical
That
case.
is
Blaming
the
somebody
most
else,
common.
and mostly management. And for everything is the management. It's their guilt, and everything. And we are just victims of this system. And we should all cry. This is really very common pattern that I see. Hey, we should all cry. We are really in bad company. This is terrible. And I'm thinking. And it's all about approach at the end. They're not thinking about how to solve it, but actually how to enlarge their feeling of being a victim.
Is it the player victim mindset you're referring to? Yeah.
Yeah. This is what I experienced very often.
Yeah, and that is actually a very big issue if the Scrum Master is not keen on recognizing those patterns, because having one time a retrospective where basically the team just says, oh, we are so poor, we are the victims. It can happen sometimes. And sometimes it is even the first thing that a new team will do, that they say the world around us is bad. But if it happens the second retrospective, then basically the pattern is already established and there will not be useful outcomes from the retrospectives. But another thing that could happen that I was observing with a team, and was really funny, that during every single retrospective, I was accompanying that team for over a year. They basically came to the point, we need to improve testing. And they did. But was testing really the problem? So they perfected their own testing while their product just had like 10 real users. And we were talking about web platform.
That's always putting the ball into somebody other's hand. It's about, hey, it's about responsibility, and not actually. It's about, hey, it's easier to actually just to put the ball to others' field and actually to testing team. This is the other field in this case, and let's they care about our issues.
I don't know, but
it wasn't even that
engineering-wise,
sorry,
there is also precisely the opposite that I observe a lot, like fix the world problem, and trying to deconstruct everything into what we precisely can do. So maybe we can't acquire new customers, but hey, we can do the testing.
Yes, and that is the opposite. And that happened in exactly that case, that they perfected their own working process. But they didn't think, is our product even successful? What could we do to make our product more successful? Maybe instead of taking 10 hours to improve our test coverage, we should just take 1 hour, take our smartphone, go to a person at the subway station and ask them, have you looked at this product? We would have increased our customer base by 10%.
and this is very common because Scrum framework is usually focusing more on the team and how to have this kind of team quality, but the product, as I mentioned before, actually it's not in my personal view, it's not emphasized good enough. So this, what you said, retrospectives, very rarely team talks about the product on retrospectives, and I agree that retrospectives it's a team meeting, it's a team improvements meeting, but it's a team improvement meeting how to be a better how to serve the customer better, how to serve the customer better, not how to be the better for them own and actually to be a better just a better team independently of everything. So I like your statement, actually, what you said before, that they should think about it. Hey, how can we serve the customer better?
Yes. So sometimes the team is too stuck in their local context and doesn't see the big picture. So I think we went over a lot of anti-patterns that we see in the world, that even well-meaning teams who are trying to do the right thing, well-meaning organizations that really want to get the right value, they still struggle. And those anti-patterns, to see them doesn't mean that somebody is trying to do something bad. But the consequence is typically that eventually people get disillusioned with their work, whether that is the developers, that is the product owner, that could be the Scrum Master, that could be even the managers of the organizations. That is the manifestation of a scream when people say, I don't want to work here anymore. And the discussion we had today was basically to see what kind of things are happening and what can we do about it so that it doesn't need to come to that point, to create a better world of work. That is the vision of Scrum, and that is why I wanted to have this conversation today. So we went a little bit over time on those discussions. It's okay. I just have point of backlog. Can have many backlogs. That's a nice way. We did touch about it in the beginning. And I don't even want to go through much detail. I just want to close with this statement from my side. If it's a Scream and not Scrum, the solution is to thoroughly inspect and adapt. Okay, thank you for giving me those 2 hours of your time, and I really enjoyed the discussion, and for myself, I took a few notes that you will see coming up as further changes to the Scream guide. So thank you very much from my side. If you have any comments, any questions, thank you.
Thank you, and I forgive you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael and Bogdan, and the rest of you. Very nice.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Also from my side, I would like to thank you all for being here, especially thank Michael for facilitating this session. Next time we will be having Roland Flam, fellow Scrum trainer. I would say that calling him a fellow Scrum trainer is an understatement. He has an order of magnitude more experience than I do, and he is quite an interesting person to begin with. He will be talking about his vision of agile coaching. The lecture or the meetup is named Agile Coaching in a Nutshell. The idea there is that an anti-pattern forming is that a lot of coaches do have agility experience but not coaching experience, and those two need somehow to be merged. There's a gap in between two of those. So with that, Michael, thanks once more. Thanks, Boris, for supporting me out of shadows always. I might not give you always as much credit as needed, but that's because I'm forgetful. Sorry once more. And thank you all, and see you in a week.
Thank
Sooner
you.
if you need me.
Cool.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.